So again, welcome everybody. Today we are covering the various data collection methods within ARM. So we'll kind of show a glimpse, an example of each one of these that you can see on the screen, and do a little comparing and contrasting. Each of them maybe has some strengths and some weaknesses, and it's really a matter of finding the one that's maybe the best fit for you and your group. So hopefully we can kind of show how to use each one and also give a glimpse into the best one to choose in different situations. All right, so the first one here is probably the most basic, simple one. Simply just copy and pasting with Excel. And so the very basics is just to use your clipboard function within Windows to copy information from an Excel file into an ARM trial. And it's very simple for the process. On the data collection side, there's no ARM required. You just have a spreadsheet. It could be totally empty when you start with, and you're just typing in numbers, and it's free. There's no licensing other than, of course, finding a way to use Excel. I don't recall if Microsoft charges for that on like an iPad or some mobile device. Typically, those apps are free. The downside to the approach, however, would be that you're using just Excel, and thus there are no data entry features to speak of. It's just an Excel sheet. The process itself is quite manual. There is no data flow or anything like that, and as a result of it being manual, that it has the chance to introduce errors, whether typing in the values or copying it back into the software, and time consuming. If you're doing it all yourself with no automation, no flow, then of course it's going to take some time to do that. But just to kind of demonstrate that functionality, I have a trial here that perhaps I've already planned out the type of assessment I may want to take. We of course would use an assessment column to describe what is going to be done. And on my other device, whether it's just a mobile phone, an iPad, whatever you might have as an electronic device to use in the field, I just open up Excel and start typing in values. And so here I've typed in a very basic, very short assessment here into Excel. And now that I have it on my main computer, I can just copy, and I use the keyboard shortcut without even thinking of it, Control-C, or you can copy here to copy that information just row by row. You can do, of course, all at once to take all of those rows, and then we can paste it into ARM, where the data should go. When we do that, there is a prompt here. ARM says that it did not detect any plot information, and so it's basically asking to confirm, since we just pasted in a list of numbers, make sure that the order of the plots in ARM match the order you took the data. So there's nothing ARM can do to make sure that the data gets put in the right spot. So that's all up to me, the software user. So that's really the prompt here. Make sure you've got the plots in the right order for the way you took that data, since it's just a list of numbers. So if I click OK, it'll just, as we said, bring in those numbers exactly in the order that they are. And I have this arrow next to the word plot that shows that right now it's sorting by plot number. So you can change that order. If I click on the treatment heading, then it changes the order that those plots are sorted in. There's also, you can sort by your assessment order or your harvest order, and both of those are found within the trial map. So if I bring up this trial map icon, it'll just show those movement arrows. This is where you can define a more custom order that you would walk through your field. So in my case, I have my assessment order set to serpentine within blocks. So I would walk down the first replicate, 101 through 106. And then, of course, instead of going back to 201 and walking down again, it's a lot quicker just to hop to the next replicate. So you can see this arrow is pointing after 106. I'll go up to 206 and work my way back. 205 down to 201, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of different options for a variety of different methods you may walk through the field, and you can set that both the assessment order and if you had a separate way when you harvest. If it's likely different equipment maybe going through the field, you can make that different. And you can see the arrows change to set that order. But in our case, we probably want to make sure that assessment order is set the way we walk through the field, the order in which we take our data. And then that order can be reflected here when we're pasting or otherwise looking at the data by just using that sort in assessment order. And you can see now the plots have changed, still that 101 through 106, but then the next plot is 206 and so on. So that's the main way to communicate that assessment order of how we would be taking our data. So back to Excel, this first method of just the list of numbers is definitely the most dangerous and really not recommended. A better way to do it would be to at least include plot numbers with the data. So if we do that, and then in my copy, I take the column of plot numbers and my data values themselves when I copy. Then when I paste into ARM, here it's recognizing that I've already got data in this column. I probably should have cleared it out before I pasted. So let me remove that old example here. Then when I paste in, number one, there was no prompt. There was no question from ARM to confirm about bringing in data. And that's because ARM has some confidence it can put the data where it belongs. Specifically, since we gave it the list of plot numbers, ARM put those numbers in where they go. So even though I was sorted a completely different order than the way I pasted in, ARM knew where the data belongs. And so it matched up plot 201, had the data value of 2, 202 had 4, and so on from that Excel document. So that's a much safer way to go to include at least the plot number so ARM can look up and know where the information goes to eliminate that potential error of not having your plots in the right order. So be sure at the very least to have the plot numbers. If you are in a different language, here I'm in US English, but if you are using a different language, just match the heading here in ARM. So mine says plot, but of course, if you're using another language in ARM, that translation might be a little different, but as long as you use that same heading that ARM sees, ARM will know that that's what you're referring to and match the data up accordingly when you paste. All right, so that was the most basic copy paste with Excel. An advantage if you individually aren't the one taking data, but have someone else, they can just send you an Excel spreadsheet with that data and get it into ARM. So it's very simple, straightforward, but of course is going to lack the functions and efficiency gains from some of these other options we'll kind of progress through today. The next one is also using Excel. But instead of just having some random or format that's been defined by somebody else, we can start with a format ARM knows, and that's the Excel rating shell. So we can actually have ARM generate a spreadsheet for us, and that will allow us to transfer data directly into ARM. So an advantage is to get our hands off the data in some ways, that we're not requiring ourselves to manually open up a spreadsheet and copy and paste. Of course, that just has the chance of being error prone if I'm put it into the wrong column or the wrong trial entirely, put it in the wrong order. There's all those potential mistakes. We'll see how quick and easy it is to set this up. In ARM, just a couple button clicks and it's generated. And of course, then it's free, again, assuming the access to Excel on your device of choice out in the field. The negatives, of course, just like the last one when we're using Excel in the field, is there's no data entry features. And we'll see what features we're referring to in some of the other options that we show, but in Excel, you just have a keyboard, presumably on the screen, to type in numbers, and that's it. And there's not a lot for data review that we'll see in that spreadsheet. And although we're automating the pull of bringing data back into ARM, it still is a manual process of actually having to have someone come and click these buttons that will show to pull it in. So this is the Excel rating shell. And I'll just clear out this data. So we have 3 columns that haven't been used yet. So to use the rating shell, we're going to go to Tools and connect an electronic data collector. And we'll see we're going to be here quite often today. And in general, using this wizard here, we first choose which direction we're going to go. So there's a little arrow here that I'll show you between ARM and whatever device you might be using. The first step is to push. So we'll take some information from the ARM trial that we have open right now, and we'll want to push it or send it out to our device. When of course we're all done with that process, we've got data we want to pull into ARM, then we'll choose that option where information will be coming back into the trial we have open. So right now, of course, to start, we want to push, and then we can select which electronic data collector, which collector option are we using. And this first example will be with the rating shell. So pretty straightforward connection here. So now when I press next, we will have our configuration options for the Excel rating shell. I won't dive into all of them, but of course, just depending on the format and what you might want to include with that rating shell, we can tinker with some of them. Probably just the biggest one to point out would be whether you want data headers that you've already planned out. So here we saw where I've defined maybe 3 assessments I plan on performing. If you have those ahead of time filled into your trial, then we can have that information included in this rating shell. And so, like I said, we'll probably kind of skip over most of those other options. You can imagine and tinker with them if needed, but by and large, the defaults will work. Then the question of where should we save this new rating shell, this Excel file, and I'm just going to save it in the folder that I'm currently working on. So when I click OK, depending on the options I have, it'll ask what I want to export. And in this case, I want to export data columns. You can either click on the column or type into this box, and I'll say, let me send out all 3, or maybe I only want to send out 2 of them, 1 and 2, since that looks like it's a grain weight, so that's probably equipment that would capture that. Now I also had the option to select header line numbers. So that would be the header is this top portion describing the data. So I could choose all of them, or maybe I only want to pick certain ones that matter to me the most. Maybe I'll just grab these main descriptions of the assessment. And now ARM will generate an Excel document. And here it's got my trial ID named enter trial data underscore rating shell XLSX. So it's created this Excel sheet, which you would typically then transfer somehow to your device that would be out in the field. And whether that's just you're using a OneDrive or Dropbox, or it's just in the cloud and you can just pull it down on that device, or if you need to manually copy it over, however you get it across. Here I just have it on my computer and I'll just open it up for us. And let me go into full screen mode maybe so we can see a little more information here. So this is our rating shell spreadsheet created for us. Just really, really basic information at the top of this first sheet. And then we have our header information. So these were the rows that I chose to include and pre-filled with those assessments I have planned. And then I've got space, all of my plots, and they are over here on the left. I guess I don't have enough columns to see that it is a frozen sheet here. So if we had a lot of columns, it'll be easy to scroll and still see those plot numbers. But here is where then we can enter in our data. And I'm just going to fill in some information. So this is where we can then fill in our assessments. There is a question about the rating shell referring to applications, crops, and things like that. And I think the person knows that this flow is specific to assessment data. So there is no pulling back of other information. This is primarily just for assessment taking. And we'll see some options. That's where the tablet data collector can come in handy, where we actually have ARM software out in the field on a device. And of course, then all of the entry fields for a trial are available there. That's really the method for putting in all that other information. So the rating shell, specifically for taking the assessment notes, is the design. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a whole lot left, I guess, to ARM if ever everything was sent out to Excel. So plot data, maybe I'll cheat and I'll just copy paste this to fill this in quicker. Once you've filled in an assessment, just to look at a couple of the other tables here in the spreadsheet, there is a sheet for treatment means. So this would be the kind of rudimentary data review that we have available for us in the rating shell. So you can just see the individual treatment means for the assessment I just took. The goal, of course, being if I did have a typo that maybe I wouldn't notice as I went through, hopefully then that treatment mean that's so much larger than the others would give me a clue, excuse me, or if it was a lot smaller, would give me a clue that, wait a minute, why is treatment 4 so much larger than the others, and allow me to go back and review those values. Say, oh yeah, that I typed that in wrong. So these are just calculations. So just as you fill in the data for additional columns, then you'll have that treatment mean updates accordingly. There's a subsample plot data. So if we had assessments that had more than one subsample, then this sheet would have been formatted to have multiple lines for each plot. And that's where I would record my data in the subsample plot data, again, for assessments that have more than one value per plot. And then the same thing, there's subsample treatment means that go with this sheet. And there is just some application information can be sent to this spreadsheet, but as mentioned, there isn't a flow back into ARM with this information. It would just be kind of a read-only for your information. There are comments for the trial and the list of treatments, just certain information, which I think you can probably customize what columns come through in the settings when we created this. All right, so I am going to save, Control S here to save those changes that we made. So then when we come back into ARM and we transfer the rating shell back onto our main computer, again, if it's just being synced online, it just will kind of happen naturally. Otherwise, you may need to copy it over. Then we can use the connect EDC again. But in this case, we're going to pull trial information from our rating shell. So then it will just ask me to confirm where is that rating shell that I have. And this is that folder I'd selected in the first place. And so it's going to scan that sheet. So it opens up that rating shell. It's actually on my other screen at the moment. Opens it up real quick to read in the memory and brings the data in. So there we can see that the data is into my trial. Then it's asking me and offering to rename this rating shell. So that way ARM doesn't accidentally bring in data again. So I'll say yes. Because the rating shell primarily designed as kind of a one-time use. Fill in all of my data that I'm going to take in that session. And then when I bring it in, that spreadsheet's done, and I can always generate another one now for the next assessment I may take. And you can see just here in my folder that rating shell was at. It's been renamed with a number behind it to kind of show, and internally in that file, there's also a kind of a date stamp. So ARM knows that that information has already been pulled in to an ARM column. And so now we have those values. There was a question about wanting to have crop height as a header. So in order to define the crop height, I think I have that as a hidden field at the moment, but something like your crop height average, min max, maybe even, that can then be included in the prompt. Let me go back to our export options. When we were pushing the rating shell, then that was part of this assessment headers, and we had selected, I should have just selected crop height row, and that would then include a blank, obviously because it's blank at the moment, into our rating shell. And then we could type in that information in that rating shell to bring it in. So you wouldn't have to pick just rows from the header that have information, but we can also bring in some information like crop height, pest density, whatever else you may want of some of that documentation about the assessment can be done as well. So a great question there. All right. So that was the Excel rating shell. Again, really simple. We're using Excel, so it's very accessible. It's a little bit more automatic than our last option, mainly copy and pasting, but there's some things that we might be missing out on. Very limited in data review options and data entry options, which we'll then highlight as our next options with software from GDM that is more designed for data collection. And so we have two of them, the ARM mobile app and our tablet data collector are the two options from GDM. This first one, ARM mobile, is our note-taking app. I'm going to go fairly quickly through this one because next week, actually, we're going to have a whole session devoted to ARM mobile. So we're going to really just hit the highlights here on this option, and then we can be a deep dive. This is new, just as of last year, our new app. So we'll spend more time on it for sure to dive into the details next week. But in terms of this flow and this building from our different data collection methods, the mobile app really offers that a deeper integration with ARM than simply having an Excel spreadsheet. So we have this direct connection where we're taking your favorites lists, your SE standard assessments, right from the ARM software and making it available on your device. And so then we'll have data entry functionality and tools that you don't get just natively within Excel. You can take plot photos, some data review capabilities as well, that we'll be able to show real quickly. Downsides to this app, kind of like we saw with the rating shell, the assessment data is really the only portion of the trial that is included in this note-taking. And there's a little preparation required as opposed to just, grabbing a piece of paper and start writing numbers down, or opening up a blank Excel document and jotting numbers down. There's little preparation ahead of time to prepare the app. I think the biggest barrier is just simply the fact that it's new. It's new to you. If you've never used it before, you don't quite know how it works. Hopefully after next week's session, at least, it'll be a little more familiar and just starting out with it to see what it might offer. It's actually pretty simple. But I have a short presentation if I can find it. As I said, we're going to go quickly through this one because we'll get to really talk about it more next week. But it's, this is our note-taking application, and since it's an app, it's available on iOS or Android devices. So hopefully, really any device that you might have. Bringing ARM, kind of talked about this a little bit already. Bringing ARM to the field, essentially. You can work offline, so it will run on your device even if you don't have a satellite or internet connection. Hopefully we can bring all those consistency tools that ARM has onto each of those devices, so all your note takers taking data have those tools as well. Plot photos can be big, and reviewing data when you're taking the notes is very important. And just to talk real quick through the flow of the data, we're going to take your lists from ARM and send them out to the cloud. And since they're living in the cloud, now your device that you're going to take notes on can pull that information down. Then for every trial that you have, we'll take just some of the information. So your list of SEs, your planned assessments, some other details about the trial, send that out to the cloud as well, so we can download those trial definitions, is what we call them, onto the device. And so that gives us the information we need to take notes about individual trials, but it'll also give us a lot of flexibility in the fact that we're not literally in the trial file, but it's just a connection to the trial. So that provides some flexibility. Plot photos, there's a question. And when you take plot photos with the app, when it comes back into the trial, it does include the plot number. So when you take a photo, it's attached specifically to an assessment, which of course is for a specific plot. So when those pictures get downloaded back onto your desktop, computer, then the photo comes with, and it'll actually rename the photo itself. So that image file gets renamed with like your trial ID, plot number, treatment number. So that way it's ready and it's kind of already cataloged for you. So that hopefully can be a nice time saver as well. So then coming back, of course, once you've taken the data with that device, we also use the cloud, send that data, export it out back to the cloud. If you're out in the boonies and you don't have that internet access yet, you know, the information stays on your device until you can get an internet access. Then you would open the app and export the data out to the cloud, which then can be sent back into the trial. So then ARM automatically imports the data from that cloud into your individual trial files. And I don't even think we need to talk too much about licensing. There are a couple components to it. We'll dive into this all next week, but you need a connection. So the ARM that communicates with the cloud is our EDC connection. Then company-wide, there's a data plan across the whole company, whoever's on the company invoice, to connect up all those devices. So the app itself is free. So it doesn't matter how many devices you use. There's no like registration or linking that has to happen. You can have hundreds and hundreds of devices for all we care. The licensing for our side is just that connection of how much data is coming in on that data plan and the connection of which ARMs are communicating to the cloud. So that's the ARM mobile setup. I want to just real quickly run through an example with the ARM mobile. I've kind of skipped through the initial setup within ARM, and you probably saw this. I should start here in the Connect EDC. We can connect to the ARM mobile app. And just kind of that first time when you're setting things up to send all your information about your ARM into the cloud, there's this little setup wizard that will just take that information, build this folder structure in Dropbox or OneDrive or Google Drive, whatever you might be using, or create a dummy Dropbox account for free or something too, works just fine. But it creates this folder structure with all that information in it. So that way, when we are in our mobile app on whatever device we might want to use, we simply log in to that Dropbox account and can start working. And so real quickly to show the process, the first step is to download the trial definitions from the cloud. So you'd want to do this while you're still in the office. Probably, just grab all the trials that you've created and download them all, so that way they're available to you on this device whenever. And so after this point, now that I've downloaded them, everything is local. This is a web application. I probably should have had that in this slide. So it's not something you'll find in the App Store, but instead it's just a URL you would go to on your device. And it's what's called a web application. So it will download locally. It will run local whether or not you have an internet connection. So you would do that initial setup and download the trials while you have internet. Then you can go out into the field, and if you don't have a connection, the web app, since it has downloaded locally, will still let you run this app, even if there's no internet at the time. So I can select trial, say which one do I want to work on right now. And you certainly can work on more than one trial at a time. If I have the assessments to do in several studies, I'll just do one to be short. So for this one trial, I have a variety of options, but primarily I want to manage the assessments I'm about to take. And so if I have assessments I've already defined in my trial, kind of like I did here, oops, with this trial. This isn't the one I have in my cloud storage. Let me get this recentered again here, oops. Kind of want to just keep this small. It is not going to agree with me now. I guess I'll just keep it on this side. Kind of want to keep it small just to mimic what it would look like on a phone device. Those will show up here. So predefined assessments that you have will show up here, or you can add more. So there's a plus sign here to create a new assessment, and you can use any standard evaluations that you have attached to the current trial, or I can see a list of all of the SEs that I have built and used. So if I wasn't maybe expecting that the trial was already at this stage, or there's some pest that wasn't expecting here, didn't have planned out, I can always still find an assessment and make an assessment through the app, even if it wasn't pre-planned and filled in. So here, let me add that standard evaluation. Maybe we'll just do the percent disease. So that fills in this assessment here. And I could fill in more details if I want, but I've kind of just built in the disease percent assessment that I'm going to do. If I go back, there's that walking path kind of matches what we had in ARM on that trial map with our assessment order. If you already defined the assessment order when you sent the trial out, it'll already use that order, but otherwise you can change it here. Then we'll go back to the main screen to enter in our assessments. And so we have our trial and the plot number that we're at, and I'll just talk quickly through some of the points here. Of course, I've got a keyboard attached, but on your phone, the on-screen keyboard would pop up to type in your assessment, and then you can move to the next plot. If I have a default value I would like to have, where I kind of can just glance across the field and tell that, oh yeah, there's not a lot of disease yet, it's pretty early on. Maybe most of these will end up being a 0 or whatever value you want. You can fill in that value and then use the button here to set a default. So this will then, now won't show that message again, have this 0 as a default. So when I move to the next plot 103, the 0 is filled in, it's kind of gray. So if this number is different, I can of course just type immediately and it'll give me my assessment value. But if that next plot, I want to use that default value, instead of having to type anything, I can use this double arrow, and that will accept any defaults and move to the next plot. So now I'm at 204. If I go back one plot, you'll see that it captured that 0 and saved it like a regular value. So now I can move quickly 204, 203, maybe that entire second replicate is all zeros. I can just cruise through plots using that default value. This arrow to the left will drop down some of those additional options. There's an exclude to kind of mark that plot as damaged. There's the picture that will open up your camera app, so you could take a picture. A little hard for me to demonstrate here on my desktop, so we won't demo that. But then there is also a comment here, so you can type in text if you need to for this specific assessment. And I'll just put in some numbers real quick. When we're getting close to the end, the 3 dots here, there is an assessment review. So now on the kind of the data review portion here, when you're done filling in the assessment, and actually let me make this a little larger if it'll let me. No, it's still really zoomed. It's a little better when it knows it's on a small screen. I thought that would maybe help me, but I guess it didn't. probably from my large monitors here I've got attached as well. But this shows the trial map, and it's really a heat map of the assessment that I've done. If I scroll back up, you can see the smallest value in the assessment is white, and then goes up to the largest assessment in that dark red. And so we can get the gradient to see and visualize the assessment. If I want to know more about a specific assessment, I can click on that plot, and it'll tell me the rating and more information about the plot. And so I can click into those individual ones. Yeah, it's clearly just not liking my monitor attachment to know how big to actually draw this. But the really important thing here is to be able to look at the assessment when you finished and check for any outliers, any typos, things like that. And the power of doing it now in that moment is that if there is something not right, you can confirm it for sure. Let's walk over there and figure out why that value is so large or so small. And maybe it's just a matter of it was a typo. I can correct it. I can do that assessment again and get the right value in. Or maybe, hey, actually, something's really strange here. This number, as weird as it is an issue. And so then that would give you the opportunity to add some more documentation. Let's take more pictures of what has happened here in this plot, this unusual thing that otherwise, if you're just reviewing in ARM after you've brought in data that was taken days earlier, or even just hours earlier when you get back to the office, it's too late for some of that. And so you just shrug and hope it's a typo. If it's a typo, do you feel confident in knowing what the true value was? Your best action is maybe just to toss that out. And so now you're losing precision with that uncertainty of what happened, as opposed to having that data collection app right available to you so you can address that. And there is a question about if you missed a rating. Actually, let me go back and open this assessment review again. So the first indication would be this black box. So these are the assessments I haven't gotten to yet. So if there's a missing value, then it shows up black here on this screen. We'll also see that in a minute in the completion dashboard to make sure that a plot doesn't get missed. So we'll see that in just one more step. I've got one thing in between there and here. And then we'll see that as well as another way to make sure we're not missing a rating before we're all done. The last thing to show real quick is just this magnifying glass lets you see the list of plots to hop in between different ones. I'm going to use it just to get to the end. So then when we take the last assessment, there is an assessment summary that comes up. And this is really the assessment header. Typically, I would have already had a crop or a pest filled in. Actually, in this case, it should be a pest. So I could fill in the disease information, but just to show that you can fill in density or diameter or height for crops and or pests, that'll all come into your header. So when I'm done finalizing that assessment, I've got this completion dashboard. And so for each trial, I can take a look at the assessments that I performed. And in this case, it tells me I've only done 13 out of 24. So that would be an obvious clue that, hey, you didn't fill in a value for every one of those ratings or every one of those plots in this rating. So that's another good way to catch that. It gives us an overall treatment average combined across all the treatments. And then it also has a control average or a standard. If you have treatments marked as your check or a standard, you can see those split outs as well. So then the last step would be to send this data out to the cloud. So that does require an internet access. So like we said, you may need to wait until you are back in the office, but in the export assessments, here in my case, it's under partially complete because we didn't fill in all the plots, but of course, for just demo's sake, I can export that out. And then it'll send that out to the cloud, and then ARM can automatically bring that in. And for time's sake, I guess we'll maybe show how to do all of that and try to take a picture and everything next week. But it'll come right in. I just need to either pull trials from EDC with that mobile app, or once you have this all set up, when you open a trial that you took data for, it'll automatically bring in the data. And so just like we pasted in here, but with no extra action from us, it'll just automatically be brought in to our assessments. Got a little long-winded there, so I'll try to catch up on our last one, which will be the tablet data collector. So the mobile app, hopefully kind of a lightweight, still gives you the data entry features that Excel file wouldn't have, but it's focused around assessment data, and it's kind of a light, quick and easy option. The tablet data collector is kind of the top of the heap with the most features. So really what we're doing is bringing the entire ARM software to the field and directly putting in data into the trial file. So the advantage there is there's no transfer of data whatsoever. It's literally the trial file they're putting the data into, and it's ARM software. So we've got all of the features and all of the fields available to put data in. So the questions about filling in application details, weather information, crop and pest stages, whatever it is, it's the whole trial there. So we can put anything and everything in. Any of the features of ARM we can make use of. So data review options, same things you do in the office to look at data that's brought in, you can do at the moment when you've finished taking data. Just like we talked about with the mobile app, to catch any problems that arise when you can still do something about it, or create additional documentation if there is something strange or unusual that occurred. And we'll also have plot photos, just like with the mobile app. You can utilize that same idea with TDC. Some downsides with the tablet data collector, since we're in the trial file itself, we don't have concurrent data entry, meaning that with like the mobile app, you could have 3 people all with the app taking data on a different replicate across a trial. If you have really a work-intensive assessment that can't get done by one person in the course of the day or whatever. Here we're in the trial file, so there isn't a way to have multiple people in that same trial file at the same time. The other downsides, we're limited to Windows because it's the ARM software, so you need to find a Windows tablet or a Windows device that is mobile enough to bring into the field, which can be expensive. So number one, you need an ARM license for that device. And if that device isn't the same one as in the office, now you need to purchase a new ARM license. Then there's also just the purchase of the hardware itself, that device, and any upkeep. Just another Windows device means more things you need to make sure it is up to date and things like that. But real quick, to show the features of Tablet Data Collector, I'm going to close that trial and just open up another trial for the Tablet Data Collector. So it's a add-in that you would put onto an ARM license. or you may, like we said, you may need another license to have another device to put ARM on, and then those tablet features. And it will enable a button like this one here on the properties panel that basically lets you set up your session for taking data. So I had that assessment number 2 and maybe assessment 3, excuse me, as well, that I want to perform. I can choose the sort order like we did before of how am I going to move through the field, so that assessment order will come in handy. The cursor order is with subsamples. We'll see if we have time to cover the way that works, but if you have subsamples, you can control how ARM will move through those in that tablet mode. I can choose my assessment columns. I'll say number 2 and 3. And if I was going to take pictures, I'd launch the Windows Camera app. I can't show the actual picture taking because I'm connected here with Zoom, and so my computer won't let me share that camera across 2 applications. But this is the wizard for configuring those assessment images. So once I've taken a picture with my camera, how should I rename those images that will be attached to those plots? And you can change the order and what components to include in that name to kind of set a system of naming. So then we get our tablet data collector entry mode, if you will. We've kind of hidden most, extra stuff that we wouldn't need on the screen. And now we're just down to the plot number, and we have an on-screen keyboard now. So I can type in and go through my assessments and just key in those values. There's some shortcut keys for 0 and 100. A missing value can get put there, and that just puts in a period in that cell instead. There's a copy down, so it'll take whatever value was right above it and also press enter. So you can pretty quickly enter in data. Try to cover this real quickly here. The subsamples. Actually, I can skip through most of this because we've talked about the functionality. You can record GPS coordinates, the plot pictures, all those things that you can do in an ARM assessment, of course, are here available to us. Let me find that. Here we go, right after this. So the cursor order based on your subsamples. So here I've got 3 subsamples for each of my assessments I'm going to do. And if you go by column, we're simply going to do 1 rating and go all the way down. So I'm going to perform the rating across all the different plots, and then I'll come back and do the next rating on all the plots, all the individual subsamples. So that's by column across plot. Of course, if we're going to want to stay at 1 plot and perform both assessments before we move to the next plot, then the across columns would let us, pick up that, each subsample. I would do all 3 subsamples in this case of that first assessment, and then I would start again at the first subsample for my next assessment and move on down the way that way. Finally, the last option, across columns within subsample, I would perform those 2 assessments on the first subsample, and then I'd move to the second subsample at that same plot and do those assessments and so on. This is a kind of a demonstration on your pictures. What you do, you use the Windows Camera app. So ARM doesn't have a built-in camera, but just use the app that's on your device to take a picture. And of course, then that picture shows up in the camera roll folder on your device. ARM will make a copy of that image and put it in the folder where your trial is at. And then we can rename that image file itself like we saw in that little wizard. So that way we have an identifier for that image. And then we simply link that image that's now in that folder with your trial to that individual plot. So like I said, I can't show that in the sense of taking a picture here, but I can mimic it if I kind of cheat and just put in a picture in my camera roll folder. So if you can see, I did that off screen, but I just have on my camera roll folder, I just copied an image there, which would pretend as if I just took a picture with my camera. And so for the plot where my cursor was when I'm actually taking notes, it now took that image that I just took with my camera and attached it to that plot. So that's associated with this specific assessment. And now I can fill in my assessment. And there's a little red triangle that will indicate that there was an attachment there. So I can always come back and view that image. And that's really the same functionality that the mobile app has. Again, we couldn't take the picture, but the whole concept of capturing that image will attach it to that plot, give it a name that has value to it, and not just some random collection of characters that were auto-generated. And now that's included in your documentation with those plots. Finally, I've got just 1 minute left, but I did want to highlight the data review. So I exited my data entry mode, and I'll pretend I just finished an assessment. So I've got this column number 1 that has data in it. So when you're done taking data, we can use ARM to do any data review, just like we can in the office. Kind of the number 1 option is that assessment map tool. A lot like we saw in the mobile app, drawing a heat map across all of our plots. Lowest to highest, a high value is dark, low is really light. A great way to spot an extreme value on one side or the other. And in this case, plot 904 really strikes us as large. And when I click on a plot, it shows the treatment performance across the different replicates. So you can also get an idea of how consistent that treatment was across replicates. And the power being, I can see that 904 is a very large value. Let's go back and find 904 and review to see what happened. And I've got 120. That can't possibly be right, depending on the type of assessment. This is a percent, so that's not even possible. I can then review and make sure to get the right value entered in and documented accordingly. So all the features. There's also a box whisker. Really anything you would do data review wise in the office is available in the tablet data collector. But the big ones are kind of put on this interface for us. All right, well, I ran a minute over. Hopefully this was helpful to see the different options that we have for data collection. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to us. A lot of times it's great just to hear what your group might currently be doing or kind of want to do data collection wise, and then we can get you pointed in the right direction of what might be a good fit for those requirements. So again, thank you everyone for your time today. Hopefully we'll be seeing you again at a future webinar coming up soon. So thanks everybody.